Sherwin Bryce-Pease is our New York correspondent and he joins us via Skype. Sherwin, good evening and thank you very much for joining us.
Hi, Colin. Good to be with you.
Yeah, well, Sherwin, we've seen footage of people having tents on their rooftops and others being airlifted by helicopters. Are the emergency services really coping with the number of people who have been affected?
It's a difficult question to answer very quickly. I think what emergency services have been forced to do, given the extent and the size of the storm and the destruction that we have before our eyes, is to prioritize the life and death situations. I know that emergency services were getting thousands of calls per hour and literally had to prioritize. Are you in danger of losing your life? Is your home, for example, underwater right now? Can you wait a few more hours so that we can help other people in more dire need? So it really is, I think there's a bottom-up approach in terms of those who are more desperate at the bottom and those that perhaps were able to get up to higher ground, up onto their rooftops and could wait a little longer. Are they coping is the question. I think it's difficult to cope under these circumstances. What we've seen from around the country, even from here in New York, we've seen emergency personnel, first responders from around the country head down to the affected region, particularly the Houston area of Texas, to assist. So, a lot of people, it's very difficult. The roads are completely flooded. The highways are flooded. People are having to use boats instead of cars to get around. So it's a very difficult situation. But I think the astounding number, and this is an astounding number indeed, is that only 22 people so far from one of the biggest rainstorms in the history of the continental United States, only 22 people have lost their lives. I think, Colin, if you want to make an immediate comparison to, for example, Hurricane Katrina, which was of a similar size in 2005, over 1,800 people lost their lives in that storm. So I think that puts a lot of this into perspective, certainly in terms of the official response and the response we've seen from first responders.
Well, I mean, like looking at the footage there, it could be very, very difficult to evacuate these people. Those that I have mentioned already, what happens when they get evacuated? Like we know that it's a norm that when people are being evacuated, they could be taken to a place of safety. But this time around, it looks like all over it's flooded. So where exactly are they being taken to?
Well, initially, some of the convention centers, some of the big churches in the Houston area were used to house people, convention centers and facilities that were on higher ground. As we are now seeing is even these areas are becoming flooded. So we're seeing cities and towns from the surrounding areas. Places like San Antonio, Texas have, for example, offered 6,000 beds. The city of Dallas, which is just to the north of Houston, has offered 600 beds. We are seeing postings from Airbnb offering free rentals to people. And of course, people that have relatives in other states or in neighboring towns are going to them. So there are a plethora of avenues for this. It's not an easy situation, but there are certainly offerings that we are seeing from various surrounding cities. And of course, in addition to this, it's going to be important for people to apply for funding from the Federal Emergency and Management Agency, FEMA. There's this agency in the United States that deals with these situations. They get federal funding, and it's going to be a process of paperwork initially, so that people can get funding if they need, for example, temporary shelter. I mean, we're seeing figures, Colin, of between 30 and 40,000 homes being destroyed. So I think that gives you a very broad understanding of just the kind of numbers we are dealing with here. Houston, for example, is a city of 2.3 million people. Much of Houston and much of the surrounding areas are now under flood. We understand that an area affecting some 4.5 million people is now underwater. It's going to be how quickly federal funds can be made available to those people and how quickly they can find warm and safe shelter.
So what are the weather forecasters saying about the next few days?
Well, the good news is that Houston airports, for example, and this is an indication of the weather improving, are going to open later today. We're also understanding that Hurricane Harvey is now leaving the state of Texas and slowly meandering its way into the state of Louisiana. It will then track up northwards through states like Tennessee, Arkansas, Mississippi, and eventually it will edge out to your right into the Atlantic Ocean. But that will be over a number of days. The storm is not the Hurricane 4 category storm that we saw hit Texas on Friday evening. It is now a tropical storm. It has winds up to 45 miles an hour. That's around 75 kilometers an hour, not the over 200 per hour winds we saw on Friday night. So this is a different storm. The big concern for authorities, though, is that it's slow moving and it's dumping rain. Flooding, localized flooding, a big issue. But of course, post-Katrina, Louisiana, states like Louisiana are much better prepared and much better resourced for weather systems of this nature.
When we have tropical storms in the U.S., you know the trend regarding former presidents. During Hurricane Katrina, President George W. Bush was criticized for not really paying close attention to the people. The same with Barack Obama. You know, like it was very easy to hear reports about how the presidency was responding to the situation. Currently, it has been very difficult. For example, here in South Africa, when we try to look at the media in the U.S., when you look at CNN, they don't have access to the presidency, so we don't get a proper briefing from Trump's office. How are you coping to get media attention regarding the presidency's support for the people of Texas?
Well, I'll tell you what, this president doesn't have a problem getting media attention wherever he goes. And as you will have seen, Colin, he went down to Corpus Christi and Austin, Texas, which is the capital of the state yesterday, just to show really solidarity with the first responders and the officials that have been working day and night on the ground. And of course, you know, a number of people in those areas turned out to see the president. He has, though, been criticized from in terms of comparisons with, as you mentioned, George W. Bush, Barack Obama, who were seen really commiserating with some of the victims. The president went down with the First Lady yesterday, spoke to officials, but actually didn't meet with victims of the hurricane. We do understand that President Trump will return to the region now that the storm has moved off. He will return to probably Houston, which is the most affected city, on Saturday. But yes, in terms of media coverage, I think what the president has seen here is an opportunity, given his low approval ratings, really to bring a sort of unified approach from this White House in terms of the suffering that people are feeling right now. And that's why we saw him head down to the region yesterday.
Right, thank you very much. Sherwin Bryce-Pease coming to us live from New York. He's a New York correspondent there representing us, and he's keeping us apace with the developments regarding this hurricane storm Harvey. Moving